People kind of quick to jump to taking a supplement in the hope that that's going to be the thing that makes the difference in their journey towards their athletic goals. And a lot of time there's a lot of other kind of levers you can pull in your life to make improvements outside of that before you even touch supplements. Yeah, and then obviously going back to the micronutrient, that's so important for sports performance, you know, from everything from energy production, building muscle, repairing muscle, recovery, hormone production, immunity. I think immunity is kind of overlooked in sports as well. I think sports people tend to have run down immune systems a lot of the time because of the sheer volume of exercise they're doing and that kind of pressure on the body to keep up. You know, having a healthy gut goes a long way to boosting your immune system, because around 70% of your immune cells are located in your gut. It's important to keep a healthy environment in your gut to boost your immune system, because, you know, the less you get ill, the more you can train, quicker you'll reach your athletic goals. Soy is not a problem food. It's demonized, but there's no evidence at all that soy can reduce testosterone in men or increase estrogen in men. But yeah, it's really not a problem. It's a very healthy food. If you're not allergic to it, then I'd encourage people to include it in their diet. It's not the same as the mammalian estrogen, the phytoestrogens that are in soy foods. They don't have the same effects, so there's nothing to worry about. So many benefits to have, again, for your performance goals, but also long-term health.
Legends, friends, newbies, welcome back to Plant Fueled. I'm Callum Weir, your host, nutritionist, and someone who doesn't truly fully understand why anybody thought pasta, ketchup, and a bit of chicken was a sports nutrition plan. But hey, that was football in the early 2000s. This week, we're diving into performance. Not your flashy supplement stacks, not your six-pack chasing kind. I'm talking about longevity, clarity, resilience, how to thrive in your body, not just push it until it breaks. And who better to explore that with than Simon Clist, a former professional footballer turned nutritionist, a man who's lived both sides of the equation, from pre-season drills to protein shakes to evidence-based plant-powered fueling that actually supports the body and the brain. We break down how the old school athlete diet got it wrong, why so many players still get sold junk in shiny tubs, and how nutrition in the sports world is finally waking up, slowly, but it's happening. We talk supplements, colourful plants, gut health, recovery, football, and what peak performance really looks like when you're in it for the long game. Simon's got stories, Simon's got science, he's got the rare ability to cut through the noise with grounded, practical insights that will make you rethink how to show up for your body, whether you're a weekend warrior or a full-time athlete. So if you've ever wondered if your diet's actually fueling you, or you're just following trends, this episode is for you. And if it does, if you do learn something, laugh once or maybe rethink your next meal, do me a favour, hit the follow, leave a star rating, leave a comment, share it with a mate who's still living on Monster and white bread. This podcast grows because of you, not some shady algorithm in a basement. So if you're here for the real conversations, let's keep it going. I appreciate you. To Simon Clist, let's dive in. Simon, it's a pleasure to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
I think in the last few years, there's been, I'd say, a huge surge of people looking to better themselves. They want, peak performance. They need mindfulness. They need meditation. There's a need to start eating right, start eating clean. And I think healthier than previous generations. I don't know if that's because, they've seen a lot of previous generations, living on more ultra processed foods, drinking a lot and burning themselves out. But I feel like there's been a giant cultural shift, and more of like a health revolution, if anything.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think you can see over the years how, particularly in sports performance, people have got stronger, they got faster, all these metrics have improved over time. And I think that's a large part into how we've kind of evolved with nutrition, our approach to nutrition and sleep and things like meditation and that. And those all things count in, your overall performance, basically. There's a lot to consider when you're talking about peak performance.
Yeah, I think when I look back, like even when you look back at like athletes from like 20 years ago, all these mindfulness structures and things like this weren't part of like, the everyday kind of routine. It was very much, eat and train, maybe recover on like a rest day. And now there's so many different things being implemented. So whether that be mindfulness, whether that be meditation, whether that be like visualization, whether that just be eating better for recovery, because obviously we've got so many different things for looking at metrics these days that I think people are taking more of an evidence-based way into looking at their nutrition, looking at that performance.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've got so much kind of data in our heads these days. There's so many ways to record data. I think for the average person, it can get a little bit out of control with, glucose monitors and recording every single metric in your life, and then getting worried about an insulin spike or things like that. So I think we go a bit over the top with that kind of thing. But there's definitely a place for it when you're recording data and trying to look at data in kind of the top end levels of sport. Definitely, the analysis of that can really help, give you direction to where you want to go with your nutrition and advice on that.
Yeah, I was like that's the thing. Like, I think with data, like I have a Whoop, so with that, it records literally everything possible, like heart rate variabilities, and like even that for me is an overwhelming thing to be looking at. And that's someone that's obviously in nutrition, in kind of like looking at my data constantly. So for the average person, I think, as you said as well, glucose monitors, like there's a need for it in some way, shape and form for some people, but for the everyday person, not at all.
No, I mean, I think it's great that we have access to all of this, but like you say, there's utility for it in certain situations, like medical situations, things like that. Again, elite sort of end of sports, definitely. If you're just, your average gym bro going to the gym once a week or something, doing a workout, and then you've got a sedentary life, sitting in the office the rest of the week, it's not having a CGM on your arm isn't going to, be that much value to you. I think there's a lot of other things you can look up before you start kind of investing in these kind of biometric data analysis. You can even go on how you feel a lot of the time. Is a big, we don't listen to our bodies enough. That can be a big thing in how we're performing. We might be tired, we might be hungry, and sometimes we ignore these cues. With our busy lives.
I think as well with performance, like it's something that I think anybody that, as you said, is working out, someone that's more athletic, whether that's be gym, running, performance circuits, high rocks, CrossFit, football, whatever the sport, everyone is looking to become their best self, and they're striving for like performance, and then they will get like a Whoop day or a Garmin or an Apple Watch and be reading all this data, and they're striving for what would be said peak performance, and actually but it's actually cultivating the habits to push towards those performances. And those things are such vastly different things. Like you can either be putting in the groundwork, which is the food, the what's going on in the kitchen, whereas the training and the performance is, it's still a great thing that needs to be done, and obviously you need to cultivate that every day. But that's around 30-40% of it. What's going on inside the body, what you're feeding it, what you're nourishing it, that's kind of what matters. It's more than the training regime, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's a huge part of getting the best out of your performance, what you're doing sort of outside of the gym, outside of training, outside of your kind of runs, your daily runs, whatever it might be, can have the biggest impact, because unless you're, like you say, supporting that training with proper nutrition and good sleep, stress management, all these kind of things, they play massive parts in how you're going to perform. So I think it's often overlooked, to be honest.
Yeah, I think there's also going to be outliers out there as well. Like, you're always going to get that guy that eats shit and like functions well and still looks great. And, there's also genetics at play there as well. Like not everybody can get away with eating, like McDonald's constantly and still looking in top tier shape and still performing at their best. So I know there's quite a few athletes that still don't really look after their nutrition as such. However, they are still performing at incredible standards, but I'm like, I don't see how, because for the average person, like if they did that, there's going to be, there's going to be, health condition concerns. But like for somebody that's doing that every day and performing, like it's something to something some people strive for because they can see someone else do it, but then they forget that they are probably just the outlier there.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, genetics definitely plays a part in it. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what some people can get away with, like you say. My background's in professional football, and I was amazed by some of my teammates that used to go down for McDonald's breakfast before training, then a Nando's after training, and they'd be fine on it, and then there'd be me like eating all my like vegetables and lean meats and all that stuff back in the day before I was vegan. And really kind of having to zone in on my nutrition to get the best out of my performance. But these other guys, some of them could get away with that, and it's a weird phenomenon. But I say for the majority of people, doing the best you can, controlling what you can with your diet is going to always be the best approach to things. Not trying to sort of cut corners and get away with it. Most people won't be able to get away with that. So I think there's a big point to be made with nutrition as well. Even though you maybe could get away with that and your genetics allow that, is it still the best thing? I mean, you don't have to sacrifice long-term health for the sake of having good short-term performance. So it's really important to fuel your body right for the long term, not just to reach that goal you've got in a few months' time or a year's time. Maybe get a PR in the gym, or knock a few seconds off your 10K, something like that. But you want to look at the big picture, and long down the road, it's going to be more important to be eating healthy sources of plant protein, healthy fats, fiber-rich diet. Things like that are going to be the most beneficial for both short-term success in your sports or exercise, and also for long-term health.
Yeah, I think we are now in I would say, society where we put our long-term health at risk because we want short-term gains. We want, the body in, 5 months instead of, nourishing it within, over years and having that compounding evidence as such. We look for aesthetics more than, the long-term health outcomes. And I guess, well, you've had a long career in football, haven't you? Obviously, you span from starting off in Tottenham and then Bristol City, Torquay, Forest Green, Rovers, Oxford, Hereford?
Oxford, Hereford, Barnet as well. So moved about a fair bit. But had a very long career in football. And I learned a lot about nutrition in that time. Not all of it good, though, because we're talking, I retired sort of over 10 years ago now from football. So we're talking, 10 or 20 years ago where nutrition was very different to what it is today. The diet, I look back at the diet I was eating then, and yes, it was covering all my macros as such. But on the face of it, you think, well, I'm getting enough protein for recovery and strength, getting enough carbohydrates to, give me energy. But there was not much focus on healthy fats back then, hardly any focus on variety of plant foods, diversity, nothing about fiber. It's really changed and come a long way since I played football. And I think a lot of the top clubs now are really kind of starting to implement more plant-based approaches to their diet, and there's always kind of plant-based foods available in the canteen at training grounds, and alternative protein sources to your typical kind of meat and fish that footballers normally eat.
Yeah, because when I think of the typical diet of what I assume a footballer eats, and I mean, I'm getting this knowledge from a documentary I watched 10 years ago. It was following around a group of footballers that a lot of their food was basically pasta and a protein source, maybe a bit of broccoli, and that kind of was about it. It didn't really go into the nuances of what we actually need to thrive. It was kind of very, very much like like a footballer approach of the gym bro diet, which was chicken, rice, broccoli, but instead it was like pasta, chicken, a white lean meat, a white fish, for instance, or a bit of like broccoli or like cabbage or something else. There wasn't really in-depth nutritional knowledge in that.
No, I mean that description of that food plate gives me nightmares, because that's typically what it was. I mean, we'd be given a pre-match meal before games, and that's basically it. We'd get like a bit of boiled chicken breast, so dry as chicken breast, and then maybe a jacket potato on the side with some butter on it, or a big plate of white pasta with some beans, maybe a tomato sauce, something drizzled on top. But yeah, vegetables were not really a consideration then. I think micronutrients really have been overlooked for a long time, and they play a massive role in sports performance. So I think a lot of people focus so much on the macros like protein, carbohydrates, and fats, but micronutrients really play a massive part too.
Which is, I would say, so like it was surprising to me, because I think like when you think about football or people performing at their best, it doesn't have to be football; it can be rugby or any high performing sport. Like, there's a pressure to be like the best and perform the best at every game. And you assume these people have their diet locked in to then, keep up for that energy expenditure, to keep up for like, performance. But when you deep down, you find out that like, there's not really that much to it at all. It's very much, and obviously that's probably changed over the years. Like I'm getting the, information from like, 10, 15 years ago. But like, also at the same time, like, eating like that and trying to perform at your best at, once again, short term, then that then affect the longevity of it, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. I think it definitely affects longevity. I think you're seeing a lot of in football space as well, a lot of players like Messi and Ronaldo, the top players in the world, do implement a lot more plant-based foods into their diet for that very reason. I think it works for them. But I think people sacrifice career longevity for one, and also they sacrifice long-term health a lot of the time, chasing high amounts of animal protein in the diet just to meet protein needs. I think it's I think it's something that needs to kind of change in the sporting world, because I think we should not concentrate so much on just the career, that you've got a life after a career, and that's something that I've been focused on with my life, and how I recovered from injuries in my football career. For a majority of my career, I suffered from a kind of inflammatory pelvic condition that kind of really made it hard for me to train and play to how I wanted to for the back end of my career, really. And it was all kind of inflammatory based, and I look back now, and it was kind of, I look at the foods I was eating and the foods I wasn't eating, and those two come together, and they kind of create a picture. I could have done a lot better, and maybe could have played for a bit longer, because I retired sort of 32. Maybe could have had a few more years in my career if I'd have had that advice to eat a few more plants in the diet, replace some of that animal protein, plant protein.
So what, like, your typical, back then, what was your typical day of eating? Because obviously that was pre going plant-based, I guess.
Yeah, so I've been plant-based just over 10 years now, or vegan. I'm fully vegan. So I only went vegan kind of a couple of years after I'd retired from professional football. So I wasn't a vegan footballer, but I would have, I regret not being vegan whilst I was a footballer. What I know now about how food can impact injuries and recovery. Typically in the hands of the football clubs, you 2 meals a day are pretty much provided by the football club in most professional football clubs. So you're given breakfast in the morning. It's normally kind of some simple carbohydrate, some cereal, some bread and jam, things like that, maybe a bit of peanut butter on there. And then after training, they typically give you something a bit more substantial, maybe some, a chicken curry, or some fish with some rice. Vegetables weren't really afterthought, to be honest. It was more the carbohydrates and the protein on the plate.
And that switch to a more plant-based diet, was that was after you retired, so it's not like you could have seen I'm guessing benefits
after I retired. When I changed my diet and I did I studied nutrition, that's when I kind of really realized what the benefits were, and the benefits that I experienced myself from transitioning to a plant-based diet. I felt after just a few months, really, my kind of aches and pains that I get every day in my hips was kind of melting away, really, and I was able to go for runs and not be like crippled the next day, and I was able to move better. I just felt generally better in myself. Yeah, so it was anecdotally, it was a massive difference for me. And it just made me feel that I missed out on a lot in my playing career, because those are foods I really neglected, because I didn't have that knowledge, and I was going on the football club's recommendation of what we should eat, and a lot of the times as well, it's the recommendations you get are more kind of get enough energy. It's more basic than get this food and that food. It's just get enough energy and just eat enough calories, because you expend so many calories in sports like team sports like football and rugby, that you really do have to eat a lot of food to meet your energy needs, and that is a big part in athletic performance as well. I see a lot of people under eating calories, especially on a plant-based diet, if they're kind of aiming for like the whole foods, because of the fiber content and the water content in there. And it's easy to do on a plant-based diet. You've got this nutrient-dense food, but it's not so calorie-dense, so it becomes difficult at times if you've got high caloric needs to meet those with whole foods alone. That's when you have to maybe start looking at some more processed versions of foods. I tend to recommend mainly whole foods for most people, but there's definitely a place for processed foods, and it can actually be an advantage in some situations. If you need to refuel quickly in tournament situations, things like that, you need fast-acting carbohydrates. So, processed foods that definitely got a place in sports nutrition.
Yeah, I think the word processed foods in general, I think, has such a stigma to it, because there's processed foods and there's very much ultra processed foods, which are probably they're not always bad. I think the version that people kind of imagine as a ultra processed food is like, the things that don't really kind of exist in nature, like those biscuits, like the other, bits and pieces that, have come from like a lab more than anything. But like a burger made out of like, pea protein and, like rice protein, it was at one point, a healthy, nutritious food. And there's not to say that those health benefits aren't there. And we're seeing that in the science as well. But I think because it's in the form of a burger instead of a whole plant, people kind of get scared about it. The same with like most soy products. Like people get scared that, this, soy chicken breast, for instance, is gonna like wreck their health. When realistically it has most of the same benefits. Yes, there's a few binders to keep it structurally like that, but there's still going to be benefits to it in comparison to like, if you're eating the animal-based version.
Yeah, ultra-processed and processed foods do get demonized, and they'll get kind of lumped into one category of being unhealthy, but I think that's a bit of a misconception. There's definitely a spectrum of, healthy on the ultra-processed foods. Things like soy milk is an ultra-processed food, but perfectly healthy for you. Tofu is processed. So these are all healthy foods, but they do have some processing in them. And I think processing itself isn't inherently bad, because it can help unlock nutrients which you otherwise might not get, that might be kind of bind to fiber or things like that. So, yeah, I think we should sort of change our mindset around the processed food thing a little bit. Obviously donuts, not a great health food, but you can still have them on occasion. It's not, they're not off the menu as such, just because you want to reach peak performance in sport. It might even be helpful to meet your caloric needs if you're struggling. So, having a donut now and again, a burger, no problem at all. And I think they've compared plant-based burgers to meat-based burgers in I think it's a swap meat trial, and they found that a plant-based burger came out on top for reducing cardiovascular risk factors. So yeah, it doesn't mean it's bad just because it's processed. And I think like things like protein powder as well. I use protein powder. Vegans get kind of fingers pointed at them if they go near a protein powder. But meat eaters, omnivores, have been using protein powders for years, and no one says a thing. So I think they can be a convenient, helpful way to meet protein needs if your protein needs are that little bit higher from being a strength athlete, for example.
Yeah, that you've hit the nail on the head with that one, I guess. Because whenever I mention a protein powder, somebody will be like, "Oh, that's unnatural. Like, you shouldn't be doing that." I'm like, "You guys have been taking whey protein powders for the last however many years. Like, there is, Yes, there's some supplements that like like B12. Okay, sure, but like a protein powder, for instance, people get really jacked up in like, oh, protein, like people like vegans need to get their protein needs through a powder. I'm like, but the supplement industry is not thriving from like the 1% of the world that are vegan. Like they are like a multi-billionaire, like a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's made up of like whey proteins, BCAAs, and all these other things that most gym bros, most performance athletes are all taking.
There's a lot of little avenues
the word vegan on it, it then gets
stigmatized. Vegans get kind of stigmatized on, but leucine's another one of them. Where people say that leucine's the only important part of a protein. You need to reach a certain threshold, but that's not that's not what we see in studies where they've compared identical amounts of protein on omnivores and vegans or plant-based eaters, and they get comparable strength gains. So I don't think it's as important as total protein intake throughout the day. And there's even some some controversy around where that kind of leucine threshold came from. The study was actually done on rats. It was done in isolated protein sources, so it doesn't really represent you eating a whole food, a plate of food, and the food matrix, which can kind of affect how that protein is absorbed as well. So I don't think too many people should get too hung up on the leucine thing. I think just aim for the total protein throughout the day, and if you're meeting those targets, then you'll be good.
Yeah, the leucine thing comes up quite a lot, and I think the people that are worrying about leucine as well are normally the people that aren't actually athletes, performance people, even people going to the gym. It's just people at like very sedentary lifestyle and just kind of read online that you need leucine, like the leucine threshold, to be met. And if you're sitting down at your everyday desk job and maybe going for a walk, whatever it is, that leucine threshold doesn't really matter to you if you're eating a wide variety of like plant foods, like sources in general. It's only if you're starting to kind of maybe look into bodybuilding that maybe there might be something there. But still, those studies, as you said, there's a lot of them that have been done in like rodent studies. So does that really apply to humans?
Yeah,
not overly. Sometimes these things do come out. I
think everyone's got a study to back up what time will tell believe. As well. But yeah, it's I think we kind of overcomplicate things a little bit, especially when it comes to protein. I think it's, like I say, just about meeting, getting enough protein in the day and enough calories as well to support, physiological adaptations from whatever sport or exercise you're doing. Because, like I say, under eating calories kind of goes under the radar a little bit in the plant-based world, because people might come to you and say, well, I'm eating 1.6 grams of protein per kilo of my body weight, but I'm still not gaining muscle and I'm training 3-4 times a week, and you find out that they're on a mainly whole foods diet, and they're just not eating enough calories to fuel that, and you need to be in a caloric surplus to build muscle. So I think it's important to know it's probably worth tracking your intake if you're serious about your sports performance. Is track it for a few weeks at least to know what foods you're getting, roughly where you are, ballpark figures. It's not an exact science by any means, but it just helps you give you an idea of where you are with things like calories and protein intake.
Yeah, that is. As much as I don't like recommending it to a lot of people, I do recommend that people at least if you do want to hit your goals, like if you are training for something or you want to lose weight, for instance, just track for like a week, 2 weeks, just to kind of like get an idea of what you're actually sticking in your body. Because I think as well, like especially when it comes to plant-based foods, obviously there's a lot of volume, but there's lack of calories in some things, and like what may look like a huge amount may be such a small amount of calories going into your body. So while you think you've actually fueled up to like to reach a potential, you could be under fueling completely. And I've learned this the hard way as well. Like at first I was very much whole foods, and I still stand by whole foods are great, and 90% of like my diet is whole foods, but the other 10% comes from things like tofu, tempeh, maybe a mock meat once in a while, and things like that. But like, and those things are really where your calories are coming from, because you can't be living on like a salads with a bit of like tofu, for instance, and expect that
No,
to be,
that's right.
performance
I totally
enhancing,
agree with you.
or just
I
everyday
advocate
life
for,
enhancing.
mainly a whole food diet. But yeah, some of it is helpful to have some kind of processed foods, like we just said. Really helps you meet your energy needs and certain nutrient needs as well. Even some of those the mock meats. Not only are they more palatable than a lot of like a block of tofu might be if you don't know how to kind of marinate it or make a nice sauce, and it can be a lot easier for people to implement use mock meats in their diet to help them meet their caloric needs, protein needs, things like that. And the protein in those mock meats tend to be kind of a lot more digestible as well, which is helpful. So yeah, there's definitely a place for them. I like a mock meat now and again as well. It's they're definitely designed to to make you want more of them. But I think once you're following a whole food plant-based diet, you can sometimes tell after you've had a mock meat and things. You think, oh, that's quite salty, or you can sort of tell when you move over to more processed foods and how that affects your body. But that just takes a little bit of time to kind of tune into that. And I'd say for people that are already on more of a processed diet and not having so many whole foods in their diet, although I'd advocate whole foods and the main would be the way to go for peak performance, you want to be doing that slowly, because if you just wake up tomorrow and start smashing in cups of black beans and quinoa and things like that, you might have a serious gut problem. So yeah, just you need to take it nice and slow if you're transitioning from that way of eating into whole food way of eating.
With the chaos of online nutrition advice, and this comes from both ends of the spectrum as well. It comes from goes from carnivore to some of the more whole food people, some of the vegans as well. There's a lot of chaos on what we should and shouldn't be eating, but so most people I guess don't know where to get their food from, and that's kind of where the confusion starts. But how do you for the average person, how do they personally filter out the
it's a good question.
noise
There's
and actually know how to
conflicting advice
go back to basics, basically?
And a lot of people kind of throw their hands up in the air and say, well, what do I do? I can't. He's saying this, she's saying that. I think it's just going back to basics, really. And you obviously need some structure and education if you're following a plant-based diet around the sort of the mainstays of what you might want to be including, like whole grains, legumes. If you've got high protein needs, things like tofu, tempeh, seitan, things like that are all helpful. Obviously, a wide range of fruits and vegetables, I think, is essential for any diet. They got multiple benefits. Not only their vitamin and mineral content, but also kind of antioxidants, polyphenols, fiber. These are all things that play into not only general health, but also reaching peak performance if you're an athlete.
I think what you've just mentioned as well is where sometimes nutrition does get confusing, because we can talk about the best health foods to eat. We can say, oh, want eat your tofu, eat your kale, and people can take that in, and then they hear terms like polyphenols, antioxidants, phytonutrients, and I guess if you're educated in nutrition, it's quite easy. But for the average person, that just seems like terms that they may not understand. Although once you learn about them, they're actually very easy to take in and understand what those things are. But I think for the people that aren't as educated and that are struggling in general, here what would polyphenols, antioxidants, what are they for?
These are kind of vital for human health. They're molecules which our own body can produce, but our bodies can't produce enough to kind of offset the kind of bombardment of damage that we get from everyday living, from things like pollution, toxin exposure, even exercise can cause free radical damage, it's called. Things like everyday metabolic processes that your body goes through just to stay alive produces these things called free radicals, which are unstable molecules in your body. And they can cause damage to cells and DNA if they're left to do their thing. So these antioxidants are vital for neutralizing the effect of those free radical unstable molecules. They help to buffer that effect. I guess you could liken it to these unstable molecules, these free radicals are like starting fires around your body, and these antioxidants are firemen going out, putting out the fires. And so what we need to do is we need to keep high levels of antioxidants into our bloodstream. We do that through consuming lots of plant foods, lots of colourful plant foods.
Yeah, I think realistically, if somebody is, looking to become healthier, like worrying about those terms isn't really a massive issue as long as you're eating like a wide variety of healthy plant foods, because those things are packed full of them. But yeah, it is. I think when people come out with terms that may not be the normal term, that's when the confusion starts, because they'll be like, antioxidants, polyphenols, phytonutrients, toxins, all these kind of things. And that, I think, they get thrown around on the internet so much by various different channels that it can cause that confusion. But if we just stick with the basics of like healthy eating, whatever that looks like for that person, because obviously that can be subjective, that you will be getting those kind of antioxidant rich foods within the body, those polyphenols. I think where it comes down to it is people get scared as well when they hear things like tannins or phytonutrients that are going to block absorption and you're going to die if you eat plants. And there's a few perpetrators in some communities that will tell you kale is bad for you and kale is going to kill you, and kale is going to do multiple other things. I've given too much airtime to those people on this podcast already, but and I think that can cause so much chaos in a nutrition space, because it is very simplicity. Like, no matter what dietary trend you're going for, whether that is going to be omnivorous or you're going to be like keto, or you're going to be plant-based, you're going to be vegan, you're going to be keto, the main structure of those should be the more plants in the diet. And that is and once you've got more plants in a diet, you've got more things.
Yeah,
you've got more.
That's right. I think we do overcomplicate it a lot.
The things that may be happening.
I think it's more about, if you're talking about getting all these antioxidants and polyphenols, even if you don't know what they mean, an easy way to kind of know where to get them is through colourful foods like fruits and vegetables. So the more colour and diversity that you have, the better. A lot of the colour pigments in plant foods are because of the polyphenols that they contain, and each one can sort of represent a different quality, but they all have beneficial health effects for humans when we consume them, from looking after heart health to immune system function to having anti-cancer effects, protecting you from cardiovascular disease risk factors. I think they have whole body benefits to consuming fruits and vegetables, but particularly having a good variety, like I say, colourful. We say eat the rainbow. A lot of people have said that for many years, and it's true. I mean, that's where you're going to get all the benefit, and that's the best way that you're going to be able to cover your bases as well for things like vitamins and minerals as well. The micronutrients, like I said, was so important on a plant-based diet. So yeah, I think if we simplify it and just say eat more colour and eat more variety of fruits and vegetables and plant foods, then you're likely to be good.
Yeah, we've heard a million times now, eat the rainbow. But what does that actually look like? Because I think there's a lot of people, and I know, for instance, my dad being one of these people, he puts, eat the rainbow as, have a salad, which is, and that could just look like a very sad salad, which is like, cucumber, tomatoes, lettuce, maybe peppers. And that's not really fueling longevity or health. That's basically water. And so for the person that is looking to, uplift their life, maybe they want performance. Maybe they're just, they're regular humans just juggling kids, work, and Netflix. Like, those people want to be healthier, but they don't, eat the rainbow to them is very much a sad salad.
Talking about,
what would you do to then elevate?
Getting more colour and variation into diet. I mean, if it was just a salad we're talking about, there's things you can do to kind of bump that salad up in terms of its nutritional quality. You can add things like some chickpeas to there, things like herbs, fresh herbs, spices, nuts and seeds you can sprinkle on there, maybe some hemp seeds or some pumpkin seeds. Lots of colourful vegetables like bell peppers, tomatoes, cucumbers, courgettes, things like that. They all help kind of bump up the nutritional power of that meal. Because I think it's a very sad salad when it's just an iceberg lettuce and one tomato. It's not really doing much for you nutritionally. So there are ways you can bump that up. A lot of people kind of say, "What do you have for lunch?" Have a salad, and that's the kind of thing they're having, and it's not really meeting their needs. I think you can make a salad a meal, definitely, with like I say, bumping up with like a bit of a carb source and a protein source. Maybe some quinoa on the side of it, something like that, just to add in some more of a complex carbohydrate in there. Maybe some tofu, some tempeh, something like that, or maybe, like we said, some mock meats might help with the protein, bump the protein up. But when we're talking about the kind of the micronutrients and those antioxidants, then you want to be looking at those whole foods I mentioned, like beans and vegetables and nuts, seeds, herbs, spices. They're all like powerhouses in the kind of antioxidant world.
At the moment, obviously, you retired from football a while ago. Are you still performing in some way, shape, or form? Whether that be the gym, whether that be going for a run, or just in other aspects
training
of your
at the
life?
gym. I do mainly strength training. That's a part of my life that I've done all my life, and it really helps me physically and mentally, I find, as well. And I'm consistent with that. In terms of cardiovascular work, I do running. I do some kind of lower impact stuff at the gym, like the bike and things like that. I try and save my joints a little bit, because as far as nutrition can take you with managing symptoms and stuff, when you've got like ongoing injuries, kind of mechanical issues, things like that, sometimes no amount of nutrition is going to correct that. And actually, when I retired, I was in need of an operation to carry on playing, so that's why I decided not to, because I was kind of at the end of my career, and it's quite a big operation, and it was kind of not necessarily going to work. It could have taken 2 or 3 years to get back fit again. So I just kind of weighed it up and thought I'd rather kind of walk away now and save myself for another day. And so it's something I can manage day to day now, and the diet definitely helps me with that. Getting all these, like I say, colourful fruits and vegetables in my diet really helps to manage that inflammation.
Do you think that if you had the nutritional knowledge that you have now back then when you started, that your food, your longevity, and
you can never say for sure, but I'd like to think it would do.
Lasted longer.
Looking from everything I've learned and looking how, especially in football, how the game's going with nutrition in football now, it's definitely changing and going towards that way. And people are acknowledging the benefits of plant-based foods a lot more in sports now. I think I'd like to say I would have got a few more years out of the game, and a few more years whilst I was still playing to how I would have liked to play, not being so restricted with the injuries. So I think it could have made a massive difference, but it wasn't to be. And now I'm in a position where I can help others to catch that early and make the changes for themselves, and then hopefully extend their sporting careers or whatever it may be, because we all want to exercise into old age ideally. So like I say, it's not about short-term gains, it's about looking ahead. And as you say, for the average person that just wants to work out once or twice a week, eating lots of whole foods, plant proteins, healthy fats, things like that, they're going to support that kind of longevity and that healthy aging.
And I think that's the thing that we should all be striving for, is more the longevity of our life cycles. Because like, as much as I don't really like to bang on about the blue zones or anything like that, because there's various other cultural identities they have within that, like gardening and friends and things like that, but a lot of what they're eating is plant foods, and they do have a longevity lifespan, and that's very much that kind of, they are sticking to the basics. They are eating a tremendous amount. We can see that the longevity of people's lives, health, illnesses, their illnesses are down, and they have these great longevity outcomes. And obviously there's various other circumstances within that, and I think realistically looking at it, we should, sometimes take advice from those people in some way, shape, or form, just to kind of like create those outcomes. Because I think, if we look at short-term health, for instance, like a lot of us do, and because I think we're in a world where we want something in an instant. Like we want something like, in the next 6 months. So we don't really think of, how it's going to affect us long term, because we don't care at the time. So it's just kind of implementing those things early on, that even if you are trying to perform your hardest right now, that these things can also, help you live on and healthier, like longer run.
Yeah,
Longer run, that is not the right word.
Yeah,
but,
talking about blue zones, I think what they do well is they keep it very simple with their diet. And they kind of, I guess they go for things that are seasonal and available to them. They're not down the supermarket getting, exotic foods and things from around the world. They're having all kind of more local produce, and, more whole foods really. They're probably not got access to the as many processed foods as what maybe some of us do. And I think food availability is a big factor in shaping your diet. I mean, a lot of people may not have access to or be able to afford to get certain foods. So it is a tricky balance. But I think people that say eating a whole food plant-based diet is expensive, and that's the reason why they're doing it, it's a little bit misleading. I mean, it really doesn't have to be an expensive diet. And if you're comparing it to, buying some chicken breast or steak down at the supermarket, then it's really not expensive.
Yeah. Something I definitely talk about a lot is the fact that if you're sticking to something that's more whole foods, like realistically a pack of chicken that is maybe 4 or 5 pound, but may rot in like 5-6 days, in comparison to some lentils which you may have to soak, or you can just get them in a tin. They're still like they're a pound. They've gone up a bit lately, but they're still like £1.20 in comparison. And like if you're eating it with a variety, you're still going to get the same benefits and maybe more. If you're just sticking to the basics, obviously it can get expensive if you want to eat, your Beyond Burgers and things like that. Those things are they are more expensive. However, they're not in relation to like, their meat counterpart. They're not overly more expensive. They're around the same. But I think people equate prices of something.
A lot of time how you value a food, isn't it? And you look at a block of tofu, people might not value that in the same way as a steak, even though it might be comparable in terms of protein and things like that. But it's definitely it's not as expensive as people think. And I think there's ways around keeping food in your pantry, like you say, dried beans or tins of lentils. Frozen vegetables are fantastic. Frozen fruit. If you're worried about buying a load of vegetables at the start of the week and then going off and wasting food, and go for frozen foods, because they're just as nutritious, and they can be a lot cheaper a lot of the time as well. So there are ways around, ways of saving money and navigating the plant-based diet in a cheaper way, really, in a more affordable way.
You mentioned tofu and tempeh and soy. And soy's been dragged through the mud for years, man boobs, hormones, GMOs, and people that are looking to, become healthier, become more athletic.
Absolutely not.
Soy. No. Is there a reason to worry about?
There's no evidence at all that soy can reduce testosterone in men or increase estrogen in men. It's not the same as mammalian estrogen, the phytoestrogens that are in soy foods. They don't have the same effect, so it's nothing to worry about. Soy is not a problem food. It's demonized, but it's really not a problem. It's a very healthful food. If you're not allergic to it, then I'd encourage people to include it in their diet. A lot of people put off by how to prepare it. They say it's just a big chunk of rubber, but you can prepare it in different ways. You obviously got to add flavor to it, but then you have to add flavor to things like chicken and steak. Like there are always flavors added to those with plant foods, and you do the same with things like soy and tempeh and even seitan and things like that. So you can get I love tofu, how they do it in Wagamama's. It's like proper pillowy. Yeah, I'm like, oh, how do they do that? Oh. But yeah, it's different ways you can prepare tofu and soy products. But if you're not keen on those, then you can try edamame beans. They're a great soy product as well.
Yeah, I see they're my staples. I'm very much tofu, tempeh, seitan maybe, but that's not a soy food. And edamame, and I think those things work for me. And I think I eat those in an obscure amount, and to this day still haven't grown boobs, haven't turned into a woman, haven't done anything that I've been told would happen to me, and I've been eating it daily for at least like 8 years, and drinking soy milk. And there's just a lot of scaremongering out there for the average human, and people get scared of soy because they hear phytoestrogen and compare that with estrogen. Yet people are still drinking milk and whey, or drinking alcohol, which is full of estrogen. But those things don't ever get talked about. It's very much only in the soy product because I don't even know why it came about. I don't know why this has become a huge thing. Because it wasn't until maybe less than 10 years ago, maybe, that like this whole kind of soy man boobs and like feminizing effects have come in. Before that, people were happily eating soy and no one ever questioned anything. Soy sauce was in your Chinese. Like you weren't gonna get you weren't gonna get your chow mein and turn into a woman. But nowadays everybody is kind of like,
it's always been a helpful
and
food, but it's
out of nowhere.
Just taken a hit with the accusations and the kind of I guess the low carb kind of community demonizing it a bit. I think those accusations maybe were kind of a misrepresentation of kind of a study or something. I think it was a study in rats where they used insanely high amounts of isolated soy protein that caused negative effects, but humans would never consume that amount of soy, and it would be very, very difficult to do so. So it's not really applicable to humans, and we don't see any of these effects in any other studies on humans who eat, regular amounts of soy products in their diet, like you and me. I mean, I have it daily as well in tofu and tempeh and soy milk and things like that. So I don't have any issues with man boobs, anything like that. So it's really not a problem. People shouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, there was a study that I got given. It's probably a year ago where someone was like, this proves that it turns you into a woman. And I was like, okay, I'll take a look at it, because I'm happy to change my my position if the science or multiple sciences say something, because obviously you're going to get one isolated study that's going to say something, and this was one isolated study that said something. However, what they didn't read at the bottom before sending to me that this soy study was done on catfish, and and yes, there was some adverse effects on the catfish, but I was like, unless we are now, it's bad enough trying to convince me that rodent studies, work in humans, but saying that a catfish study now works in humans is a wild accusation, because they're like, this proves it. I'm like,
it's
not catfish. We are not fish.
It's wild
We're
how many
not
people kind of extrapolate results from one species to another. I mean, obviously, rodent studies are used in science to gain kind of a understanding of a mechanism that might happen, but then needs to be proved in human data. So yeah, using catfish is it's probably not going to be relevant to what's happening in a human.
Yeah, and I think as well, like when it does come to rat studies or just rodent studies in general, I think it's only like 90% of them don't actually equivalate to what happens in a human. It's a very low, 5 to 10% that there is an outcome that is similar, but that is very rare, and it's not normally not to do with like nutrition.
It's no wonder people are confused, because
very rarely to do with
when people use these studies, it's and sounds so convincing about what they got out of the study. It's it definitely is confusing when you got all these opinions and things going on. So yeah, I think it's important to like I say, go back to basics. We can look at the like you say, the blue zone populations and see what they're eating, and the way they simplify their diet. They're not chasing this nutrient, that nutrient. they're just eating, whole foods, in-season foods, and foods that are available to them. And obviously other things, lifestyle factors, just as important. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to learn from them, but I think the modern vegan diet has kind of took a turn for a while where it was going down the more processed route, and we're getting more availability of processed products because people are always chasing convenience. We haven't got time anymore to cook, things like that. So that's always something you've got to juggle when you're kind of advising clients and things about what to eat, when to eat it, because a lot of people don't have time. So it's about saving time while still getting, nutrient dense food.
That is one thing that I think comes up along a lot, especially with clients of mine as well in the past, that there's lack of time for these things. So it is very much, I'm going to go for convenience. A lot of the more convenient foods aren't the healthiest of foods, and I think we all know that. But that's not to say there aren't healthier foods out there that are, that can have benefits to you. It's just having to look for those things as well. And whether that's, someone trying to hit a protein goal, there's going to be, things out there that can help alongside that. But you just have to, be, I guess, more cautious about what you're picking up in a supermarket for, like processed, because you can pick up like an ice cream, or you can pick up a bag of like crisps and a sandwich and a meal deal, and that's not really going to help with your longevity, or that's not going to really help with your health. However, there are other things in supermarkets that you can pick up quite easily, even if it's something that is like a microwavable bag of like lentils and rice, for instance. It's not the sexiest of foods, but it does help. And
I think the way we're marketed to
more
with
informed
the high
choices.
protein thing at the moment is crazy. Like everything's turned high protein these days, and it's just it's almost like trying to hide the fact, like a smokescreen for what the product is, like a high protein chocolate bar essentially. And if you need to quickly smash in some protein, then you might work for you, but it shouldn't be something you do all the time. There's places where you want to be getting things like protein, healthy fats from for the majority of your time, and you shouldn't rely on these kind of heavily marketed protein rich foods, because often they're not great in protein either, to be honest. Like I say, some of these protein bars that you see in supermarkets might be something like 10-15% protein. Yeah, they're not particularly high protein foods. So I try and I think reading food labels is a whole new education as well. So I think that's an important part of when you're in the supermarket. If you can try and learn how to navigate what's on a food label, that can go a long way to informing your choices of what you're eating.
That's such an important thing to do as well, is be able to read a food label, because like prior to nutrition, I was just picking up a protein bar, for instance, because I thought it was going to be high in protein, and from the back of it, it's like, oh yeah, you get like 10 grams of protein from this, but also if you look down on the ingredients and you work out calorie ratio to like fat ratio or like carb ratio, a lot of these are like fat bars or carb bars but with protein in them. But people don't work out or equate that protein or carbs is 4 grams per calorie, and the same with fat is 9 grams per calorie. So once you can kind of work out that, you can kind of see past the marketing and be like, oh, this is actually not a good source of protein for me if that's something if I'm looking to achieve a certain goal. Like the other day I saw there was like protein Mars bars and protein Snickers now. I'm like, that's fucking wild. Like I don't know if anybody needed these or asked for these.
It's crazy.
The fact that they're
it's really misleading as well, because it sends people down the wrong path and gives them the wrong idea about the foods they eat, because unfortunately we tend to equate high protein to being healthy, and it's not always the case. It's about the whole the food matrix essentially of what else is in that food, and if you're really chasing kind of a fast fix of protein, then I'd suggest having a protein powder. At least that you're getting the isolated protein, and then you can put that in a smoothie and then add in some fruits and whatever it may be, some seeds, and then make that a bit more of a nutritious packed version of a high protein snack.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think we think too much of protein. Like, yes, protein's important. I'm not saying it's not. And I think there's parts of the vegan community that like say that we don't need protein, which is a wild claim in general. But we don't need as much as I think a lot of people are making out, especially for the everyday human. But I think what we forget about is all the other micronutrients that we actually need, which is the smaller things that are helping our bodies thrive. Because like protein's great, but like for instance, if you don't have the magnesium and the calcium there to support that, like it's going to do shit. It's not going to do anything. And it's the same with fiber. Like we need to be consuming more fiber. We're more worried about eating more protein than we are about fiber, which is actually going to help our bodies. But like we're in a weird time
out there, as opposed to opposite end of the scale to protein, really, in terms of how people prioritize nutrients in their diet, especially in terms of going back to sports nutrition. I think fiber can be really beneficial for people in the way it kind of modulates their gut health. Because there's a lot of emerging research suggesting that better gut health is going to improve your recovery and athletic performance. Specifically, reducing inflammation. That's a real powerful part of peak performance. Really, getting recovered, ready for the next session or the next football match or whatever it may be, and having a good healthy gut microbiome is a real big way to go towards that. And you need to fuel it with the right foods, and fiber is the preferred fuel source for these beneficial gut microbes. And obviously, plant foods are the only foods that contain fiber. So getting a nice variety of different types of fibers, different plant foods, is going to be optimal for your gut health.
I think as things change over time, and we see more people leaning towards, even if they don't go fully plant-based, making more of an effort to eat more plants, or like plants are more plant predominant, we're going to see performance heighten. Whether that be through like the bodybuilding community, whether that be the athletic community, whether that be the CrossFit, High Rocks, whatever communities, like the more education we have these days, and things are slowly changing, and even governments are saying that we need more plants on the plate and we need to reduce meat intake. I think we're probably going to see a rise in what we thought wasn't possible for a while, when we can see that people can kind of like recover and perform at better standards once they have the proper nutrition within inside them. Because obviously once you take away the very beige versions of foods that a lot of these kind of like performance athletes are eating, and
I really think that's the case.
We may see and
I look forward to the day when that does happen, because there's so many benefits to have, again, for your performance goals, but also long-term health. And then obviously going back to the micronutrient thing, that's so important for sports performance, from everything from energy production, building muscle, repairing muscle, recovery, hormone production, immunity. I think immunity is kind of overlooked in sports as well. I think sports people tend to have run down immune systems a lot of the time because of the sheer volume of exercise they're doing, and that kind of pressure on the body to keep up. Having a healthy gut goes a long way to boosting your immune system, because around 70% of your immune cells are located in your gut. It's important to keep a healthy environment in your gut to boost your immune system, because the less you get ill, the more you can train, the quicker you'll reach your athletic goals.
When it comes to performance nutrition, people think more about supplements. And is there any supplements that you advise that somebody looking to kind of really get the best out of themselves?
Supplements
would you recommend?
They're not for everyone, and people kind of, I think a lot of time are too quick to jump to taking a supplement in the hope that that's going to be the thing that makes the difference in their journey towards their athletic goals. And a lot of time there's a lot of other kind of levers you can pull in your life to make improvements outside of that before you even touch supplements. Aside from the supplements we talked about, like B12, which vegans need to take, if we're talking about sports supplements, then probably the most studied sports supplement is creatine. It's got a fantastic safety profile. It's not only good for helping you build muscle and strength, but there's also some cognitive benefits to it as well. So I think that's one that people could try, but I wouldn't even try that before you've even sort of got your nutrition on point. You're getting consistent, good quality sleep, and you're using techniques to manage your daily stresses as well. Because all these things, I think, will have a bigger impact on your performance and how you're progressing than taking a creatine supplement or any other supplement. Protein powder, is a supplement, a dietary supplement. So that I put ahead of creatine, because if you're struggling to meet protein needs, then that might be a useful way to meet those. But again, not essential. On a plant-based diet, you can meet your protein needs without protein supplements. Just knowing which foods to go for, which are a bit higher in protein, like we talked about already, like soy foods and seitan and things like that, are really, really helpful. So yeah, as far as supplements go, I wouldn't recommend too many. There are some that recognised by major sports organisations like the International Olympic Committee. Things like beta-alanine, caffeine, sodium bicarbonate, nitrates, things like that. But I'd start with food first. I'd simplify it for everyone. Just say get a balanced diet with a lot of variety of whole foods, and you'll cover most of your bases. And then outside of that, lifestyle factors, like I mentioned, are going to be massive for improvements in your sports performance. I think supplements are kind of, it's obviously a whole industry, and it's a money making industry. And really, it's more for the elite end of sports performers, because it gives you that kind of marginal gain. But the biggest gains, like I say, are going to come from consistent, healthy eating, good sleep, stress management, things like that.
Yeah, it's kind of more of a food first approach, and I very much stick to that as well. Apart from the the B12 and maybe the omega once in a while, maybe a D3, then the only thing realistically I do take is a protein powder once in a while, or if I've got certain goals, and creatine. I find creatine beneficial for me, but also some people don't actually see the benefits at all, and unless you try it out. But also, it's not essential for your everyday nutrition. You may see an enhancement in your cognitive function, but if that's something you're not overly worried about, and you're not
stepping into the gym every day, like I say, it's for the few.
It's not something that I think these everybody should be taking.
And don't they're not things that you should really do before you've got your other kind of things in place, like I mentioned. Obviously, supplements outside of those kind of ergogenic or performance boosting supplements might be things like vitamin D, like you say. Particularly in the UK, I don't think we get enough sunlight, so everyone should take a vitamin D supplement. Multiple benefits from having optimal levels of vitamin D in your body, like healthy hormone production, immune system function, even muscle health, and the way muscles contract helped by vitamin D, and the way that can pour calcium into your body as well. So that's a supplement I'd say everyone, whether they're engaging in sports or exercise, would take anyway. Omega-3s, again, it's not an essential supplement, but I take it, and I do recommend to my clients to take it, just because the type of omega-3 that we get in these supplements are the kind of longer chain versions, EPA and DHA, which are harder to get on a vegan diet. You can't get them directly from a vegan diet unless you have algae source supplements. We can get other sources of omega-3 which can get converted into those longer chain versions, and they're typically from walnuts, flax seeds, hemp seeds, chia seeds, things like that. But they don't have the same effect in terms of the anti-inflammatory effect that they might have for sports performance. So I'd take, if you're engaged in regular sports performance and you're suffering with some kind of achy joints, things like that, then I would take a omega-3 supplement, see how you go with that.
Yeah, and as well with the omega-3, even those the walnuts, chia seeds, hemp seeds, whatever the seed is, there's no guarantee it's going to give you effects if you can't convert it properly either, because the conversion rate can be low, and especially if you've got, you've been dealt a shit hand with genetics, or like you've got a really beige diet, for instance, that conversion rate is going to be so low. So like, is it worth ignoring it and instead just kind of instead of just going for an algae based source, whether that be like an algae supplement or like a bit of seaweed once in a while. But I think people underestimate the omega-3 content and what it can actually do. I've heard complete shit sometimes where people are like, oh, now that we're vegan, our genetics have changed and we can like now. I'm like, that it doesn't work like that. Like, just your body's probably converting a bit more because it needs some more, but like your body's not just replicated a whole new version of yourself that can then do things. Like, you very much have to have
it's
a good conversion rate.
If
you don't have that, also most people don't know because they've never had it
really
tested.
Think about. And even kind of omnivores that don't eat fish can be low on omega-3s, and there's kind of an index that measures your omega-3 status, and most people are below what we'd consider optimal. It doesn't seem to, it's not shown up in science as translating into being danger for long-term health. Just because we're not dying from or having deficiency of it as such, it doesn't mean we're thriving as we go into old age and throughout our lives. I think it's something which everyone should consider if they're not eating fish, particularly vegans, vegetarians. I think it can be a really, really helpful nutrient to consume, because those kind of, like I say, those long chain versions of omega-3 have various roles in your body, like cell health in your brain, and the EPA version is really kind of a anti-inflammatory effect in your body. I mean, given that we have so many inflammatory conditions in our modern day lives now that lead to disease, I think it can be a beneficial thing for most people to take. But like you say, you can test it. There are ways of testing that. And I always say it's, before you supplementing, sometimes it can be best to test your levels of something to get an idea of your baseline and see how much you need to supplement that to get to an optimal level. Particularly more important, things like minerals that hang around in your body a lot longer. They can be a bit dangerous if they get too high levels. So things like iron, I'd say, get that tested before you think about supplementing that.
Simon, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. For the people that want to know more about you, find you online,
first of all, thank you for inviting me on. It's been a pleasure.
Where can
I love what you do. I love your I can't stop watching your Instagram rants about about the misconceptions and myths of plant-based diets, and about plant foods in general. I love all that. People can reach me on my website, www.proplantsnutrition.co.uk, Instagram, proplants_nutrition, on Facebook as well, Proplants Nutrition. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, it's Simon Clist. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Amazing. Simon, it's been a pleasure. I'm grateful for you.